And welcome back to the Shit Behind the Show. This week, I have a guest, Heather. Thank you for joining me, Heather. So appreciate you joining me.
Hello, thank you for having me.
I first reached out to Heather on TikTok. She shared her story, and correct me if I'm wrong, but your video went viral like within a day or two of posting, like your first video.
Yeah, it was really crazy. Within like 2 hours, it was up over 5,000 views, and every time that it would refresh, it would just be going up by the thousands. And now I think it's up to like 15.7 million views, which is really insane, but really amazing at the same time.
It is amazing because the purpose of you posting that video was to raise awareness for domestic violence, right?
Right.
And we share that, unfortunately. My experience seems like I can't even say that it was a DV experience after talking to you and hearing your story. Like, it just sounds like okay, yeah, that was nothing, even though it affects us all. But you know what I mean? I'm just like, wow, I am so lucky to get out of my situation. There are emotional scars, still, but nothing physical, which we'll get into your story and then I'll ask this question. But okay, so I want to start with just tell us briefly what happened that night. Um, that you were attacked. And how long were you with him? Um, things like that. Let's start with let's just get to the point and start with that and then we'll go back.
Okay, so everything started the day prior to this happening that sort of led to this. So we had a really bad morning, and he was threatening me quite a bit. Um, I will say a major trigger warning. But he would threaten to take me to this place where he would have, or he told me that he would have men SA me and like do all of these like weird things. And he threatened me a couple times. One time he actually drove me there and just like parked outside of there. And so I knew that he was serious. And the abuse had been going on for like a year straight at that point. And it was like he said to me, I'm just done with you. I'm going to take you there and I'll just let them deal with you and I don't have to deal with you anymore. And I just I just couldn't take it anymore. And I said, you know what? I'm just out of here. I can't take this anymore. And he was laying in bed and he didn't get out of bed. Whenever I was like packing some things to leave, and I just grabbed a few things and got into my car and I left. I sat by a lake for most of the day, and he didn't start texting and calling me until later. But then all the normal things that abusers like to say, I don't know what's wrong with me. I don't mean it. Whenever I say these things, please come back. I don't know. It just kept on, and I told him I can't come back. I'm just done. I'm out of there. I'm not coming back. And I didn't have anywhere to go. I didn't have any money. He'd taken everything at that point. I didn't have anything on me besides my phone, which was being like surveilled really extremely. I was in a car that he knew where the location was, and I didn't have anyone to call by that point. I had cut everybody off. I hadn't talked to anybody in I don't know how long, and so I just sat there. And then I ended up falling asleep in my car that night, and then he came and he found me the next day, and he just started going just crazy at first. He tried to like check my car, search it for a little bit. I don't know what he was looking for, but then he had me sit in the truck with him, and he just told me, I really don't know why you didn't come back. I like, you need to just come home with me. I miss you. We can work this out. And just told him that I couldn't. And there was just a lot of back and forth after that. And eventually he wore me down and I agreed to go home. And even on the drive home, I knew it in my gut. I could feel it. I didn't want to be going home. He had me stay right behind him in my vehicle, like stay right there. And there were a few times that I just wanted to just turn off and just drive as far as I could, but I didn't. I followed him home and he told me to just go into the room and I did. And he told me he'd be in there in just a minute. And he kept telling me how glad he was that I came home so that way we could make things right. And those were the words that he used, that he wanted to make things right. And that just still stands out to me a lot because he was always very careful in the words that he used. He was very big on like meaning what you say and choosing your words because they mean things. And it just didn't stand out to me then, but I feel maybe he thought in some way he was. I don't know. I'm not quite sure. But I went into the room and I wasn't facing him when he came into the room. He told me to lay down on the floor, and I did. And I didn't look at him. I just laid on the floor. And whenever I did, I looked up and he had blue gloves on his hand and a white container that he was like holding. And I tried to sit up and he pushed me back down. And then I just felt it, and it was. I don't know that there's a word that describes the pain that I felt. I know that it has affected how I feel regular pain now because I just don't even know that there's something equal to that. But whenever he started doing it, I started to scream and just kept squirming, trying to just move and get away. I had my eyes squeezed as hard as I could, and I could feel him like rubbing it into my eye, into my right eye. Um, and I was screaming very loud at that point, and he just stopped. And he told me that if I didn't stop screaming, that he was going to pour it down my throat, and that it was going to melt my insides, and that I would suffocate and I would die. And I started to pray, and I stopped screaming, and he poured it on the other eye, and I didn't make any other sound. I just laid there and I just prayed. I just tried to focus on my prayer. I tried to focus on being quiet. I tried to focus on just surviving because that's just all I could do at that point. And then whenever it was over, he had a whole plan as to what I was going to say. Yeah, he had planned the whole thing. So,
Premeditated for a bit.
yeah, so no.
Can you share with us what the chemical was?
I don't know for sure what it was. I do know that it had the same pH as oven cleaner. So for like a regular balanced on the pH, it's 7. Anything under 7 is an acid. Anything above 7 is an alkaline burn. So alkaline affects you differently because it melts. And so it wasn't an acid burn that I had, it was an alkaline burn. And it had the same pH as oven cleaner because that is what he told me to tell anybody that asked me what happened, like what it was. He told me to tell them that that's what it was. And so I'm not sure what it was, but I do know that it was at least alkaline.
So I mean, he really did his research and premeditated this for a bit. This was not just a spur of the moment.
Yeah. And let's just I just can't imagine doing something like that anyways, but let alone like just it, it was just insane. And then after it was all done, it was like a flip, like he like flipped a little bit again, and he never hit me again. He never, I mean, he was still very verbally abusive, but he never like did anything. He was like almost happy again that I was completely like dependent on him, and it was incredibly sick. Like it's still very, it's just sick. I don't know.
So when Heather and I, our first conversation was a couple weeks ago, which we instantly just like clicked.
Yeah.
You're amazing. We had fun, we laughed, we talked about our experience. And the behavior that you just described is, and I told you the whole story of what I went through, is along the same lines. It was almost like, almost this pride, like I'm proud of what I did. And like, oh, what are you going to do now? You
Like
need,
I'm untouchable. Look, I got away with doing this, and you're still here.
yeah.
And I feel like that does two things. I think that it, one, empowers them to not make a change. But then it also, to the person that is being abused, it brings you down more because you start to believe what they say. And I think that's why people stay as long as they do, is because they start to believe they're this figure that's way up here and you're treated like you're down here, and you start to believe that. And then it ends up getting to a point that it can get too violent. Somebody eventually decides to leave. Like, it's not a good ending. And so, yeah.
Yes. In my situation, it actually, um, the abuse started with a previous marriage and it was substance, uh, he was addicted to drugs. And so he got arrested. And I remember having a conversation with the police officer, and he was telling me, you need to leave. You can't, you need to leave. And I'm like, but he didn't hit me. He hit the wall behind my face. He hit the wall past my face, Christine. Like, hello. You know what I mean?
Right.
But I
And to
was
like,
justifying it.
well, to hear yourself say it now, you're like, what? But at
Yeah.
the time, that is like a literal justification that you make. And even if it's the smallest little thing that you can hold on to, you do.
Yeah. And a lot of it is when you're with someone like that, there's a point, and I still find myself doing this even in my dating life. There's a point that that person was your safe space.
Mm.
He didn't mean to, and he loves me, and he's just hurt. And so in your mind, you do justify this behavior, and this is important to discuss. Well, I'm triggered right now, but it's important to discuss because there are so many women in our shoes right now that are on the brink of what you went through and what I went through, right?
Yes.
It is right there. It's coming. And you need to know the warning signs, and you need to pay attention. First of all, something that really hit me was you said, I just knew in my gut. And that is something that I can relate to. Like thinking back, like I just knew that night that I was beaten, even though we didn't have an argument. So in my situation, we had just gotten married. We didn't
Right.
have an argument for months. In fact, we hardly ever argued the whole 2 years we were together. Like, yeah, it was just, we didn't. And I remember thinking that night, just something felt just unsettling in my gut. Um, I I want to discuss now. Well, let's go to, okay, so he's taking care of you. At what point did you decide I need to report this?
So I actually did not ever report it. What happened was is I was a member of the Coast Guard, active duty, and I after this happened,